back to the Making Sense of Money podcast presented to you by P1FCU, where we tackle all the financial topics that matter the most to you. I'm your host, Tanis, and on today's episode, we are welcoming our Champions for Change winner, Nick Eylar and Kim Neely with Two Rivers United Child Advocacy Center. Welcome.
Hi.
Hello. How are you guys doing today?
Awesome. Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
I've been learning, up when I found out you guys were going to be our next guest, I've been kind of educating myself a little bit on who you guys are and what you do, and I just think it's so incredible. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And I thought you could maybe start us off by giving us each your role, what you do, and where your passion started.
You want to start?
Sure.
Ladies first.
Okay. My name is Kim Neely. I am actually the regional district manager for Child Welfare System in Idaho. I've been with the department for a little over 17 years. And so how that evolved into becoming the co-founder and chairman of TRU CAC is just our collaborative work together on investigating cases of maltreatment against children and wanting to go create a resource that gave us really better outcomes kind of through the judicial process and more efficiency in accessibility to kind of a critical service when we're talking about the forensic interview component of talking with children after they've experienced something hard.
Oh my gosh.
So
Not all heroes wear capes.
Right. And my name's Nick Eylar. My day job is with the Lewiston Police Department, and I have been involved in kind of child abuse and sexual assault investigations for going on 7 years now. And it kind of has turned into a passion, for lack of better words, of mine as far as the investigations and the work. And during that work, I met Kim. And this is something that we both have for years talked about, the need to get our kids better resources to help with the trauma that they endure and have their voice heard and to help prosecute these cases. And for years, it's kind of just been the police department and CPS doing these, and we just needed something better. And so we came up with Two Rivers United.
Gosh, that's heavy stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys seem so positive and happy and what you're doing. You guys are doing some great things. Yeah. I'm sure you rely on each other.
yeah, child welfare and law enforcement are they're reactive systems, right? We react to things that have already happened. And an advocacy center has a role in that, but there's so many other components of prevention, education, community support that we want to build and expand on. But really, we felt like this was a need because kids are afraid to talk to cops sometimes, or the CPS workers who, might take them away, depending on what they do and don't share. And so creating an environment where you have someone who is neutral, who is solely focused on the best interest of that child, giving the opportunity to talk about what has happened to them is really kind of what drove us to saying we have to have a better approach of how we provide for kids in our communities.
And it is tough stuff to deal with. It's stuff that people don't like to talk about.
Right.
But I would also say that it is super important to help those people that don't get to help themselves. Some of these kids are like, no, we are their only voice. And so do you have to kind of find the good in that?
Right.
And have good people around you, good teams, whether it's the detectives I work with, our partners in the community, and kind of find that good. So.
Well, you're fully equipped, with both of your lives. You're
Correct.
fully equipped, which is really special that you guys are able to do that.
Yeah.
So you kind of answered a little bit of some of my questions, which is great. It's a good segment. But can you tell us what TRU CAC is exactly? Break it down a little bit and the mission behind your work, a little bit more specific.
So a child advocacy center is a place where children who have been victims of abuse or maltreatment can come and tell their story. And that story then gets turned over to the people investigating or working with these families and children to help them through the process of whether it's court, criminal court, civil court, that type of thing. In the past, these kids have always had to come to the police department or to CPS to kind of share their story. And that in and of itself can be kind of a traumatizing thing for children.
Oh, totally.
Even, plain clothes, not wearing a big uniform, kids still understand the dynamics of where they're going and what they're doing.
Right.
And so to have this center that is solely focused on helping them, whether it's their story, their trauma, referring them to counseling, everybody in the law enforcement CPS world that works these cases has kind of an agenda, their own personal agenda, with the kid being the center. The CAC's only agenda is the child and focused on them and getting them the treatment and help that they need. And that's kind of the big role that was always missing, was just that solely focused on those kids.
So it's just like really like a safe place for that child to properly unload. And
Correct.
It's also like forensic interviewing is a very strategic method trained to be applicable to different stages of development for children. And we talk about stories, but really we call them experiences, right? Like kids trying to talk about hard, uncomfortable things that have happened to them is a confusing message, because they don't always know how to articulate things the way that adults understand or want to believe when it doesn't fully make sense. And so when a child has a negative experience, being able to talk that through with someone who is trained to interpret and understand the right developmental state, the developmental functioning of where that child is at, is really critical in the judicial process, to be able to explain like why, when something bad happens, why did a child respond this way versus what the adult brain processes should have been a different response.
right.
And so it's having someone be that expert to explain why children don't respond the same way that adults do when hard things happen.
Yeah. And
Or
like
want to
being
talk
patient.
about it, or be able to explain it, or just all the complications that go behind who is a safe person for me to share this with.
Right. Oh gosh, that's so incredible. What inspired the creation of TRU CAC, and where did the idea come from? I know, obviously, there's a big idea there. But
So, I mean, really it started, so for years, throughout my whole law enforcement career, most of our interviews have been done by law enforcement. The standard of practice has changed to where these child advocacy centers are opening up around the country. Every region in Idaho, so Idaho is broken up into different regions as far as the state goes, and there is 7 regions in Idaho. Region 2, which is where we are at, has never had a CAC. And so if law enforcement wasn't doing the interviews, or we didn't have time, we would have to drive these kids up to Coeur d'Alene or Spokane, down to Boise to get these interviews done. And so you're taking these 6-year-old child who probably just went through the worst part of their life, asking them to drive 2 hours and then sit down and tell their awful story or their experience. And it's just not conducive to kind of helping with their trauma and getting all of that out.
Yeah.
And so instead of driving and having law enforcement do this, we really just said, like, listen, this is a need here. And so we started talking to kind of our community partners and saying, hey, what do we think? What do you guys think? And everyone we talked to was like, yes, yes, this is something that we need. Our fellow CACs in the state, same thing, huge champions for us, kind of saying, yes, go forth and do this. You're going to have more people coming in than you even realize, which is sad, but also good.
I know,
right?
it's like about time. Like,
correct.
How did this not exist before?
Right. And it was really shouldered on law enforcement and CPS before, which it was getting done. It's also a big part of the CAC is kind of the trauma aspect of when you are a victim of a crime, whether you're an adult or a child, you have your brain is traumatized from what is happening. A huge part of that trauma and helping with that is letting it out and having that, being able to release it and tell someone your experience. And having the right place to do that is a huge step for us in our community. And so we've probably talked about this for, too long. I mean, 4 or 5 years at least. This has been in our brains as far as something that we need to do. And finally, about 1.5 years ago, Kim just said, hey, like, we're done talking and we're going to go forth and do this thing. And we did, one step at a time. And it seems like at times it seemed like it's like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever. And then you look back and it's like, holy cow, this has been really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So practically and financially, what did it look like for you guys to set up a nonprofit of this size and of this, Intensity.
Yeah. Time. Like doing your time and your homework really, we've put the cart before the horse so many times, just because of lack of like knowledge and understanding. But we've had wonderful support from different organizations, but really just understanding like the volume of time that goes into strategically understanding every step of like taxes, business licenses, asking people to believe in your vision and giving you the space to do that. We are really, really supported by our local hospital in that we have a free space to function out of for our initial startup is huge for any nonprofit, not even just of this magnitude or structure. Just having a free space to function out of has been really critical to us being able to launch so quickly with really limited funds. And so just actively and intensely pursuing what is going to help you have sustainability in our success has been probably where a large portion of our time, energy, and focus has been in the last 6 months.
That's like its own job right there.
Right.
Like,
when we first started, people just said, "Oh yeah, no, you guys are there. You're ready." And not realizing like, oh, all of the things we're not starting just like a nonprofit that is kind of on that aspect. No, we're going to raise money. We're going to have employees and all of these things. And so we really did kind of take some steps forward going, oh no, we need to do this first, filing for our state tax return, EIN numbers, and, having to connect with local attorneys to help us file the paperwork. And so really doing your research on what type of nonprofit you're going to start. So that's a big one because then you can have an idea of all of the things that you need to do to lead up to that. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who, might want to start a nonprofit, maybe, whether it is something as simple as like Babe Ruth or something, to this level, would you say do your research first would be like the number one takeaway, or is there another good one?
Go ask the right questions.
Yeah.
We would ask a lot of questions about, hey, is this a need? And a lot of people would be like, yes, absolutely. We need this. And again, you're ready. And then we were like, okay, we're ready. They said we're ready. So we went to start doing it and like, oh, actually, we're not ready. So really identifying those, and it's not hard. It's out there. You just have to understand what you're trying to look for and the forms you need to fill out and when you need to have them sent in by. And all of that was just stuff that we really didn't prepare for. We kind of did on the run. So
well, and I mean, how do you know that stuff? I mean, what resource? Yeah, right. What resources did you really lean into during that time?
We had a lot of, so like we have on our board of directors, we have an attorney.
Perfect.
And so she's a huge advocate for child neglect and kind of working through that whole process, and has been a big partner of ours for years. And so she was a huge resource, right? As far as the legal stuff went, hey, Jesse, would you read this? Would you look at this? Would you make sure we're, centered there? And then, I asked a lot of questions to our partners, like at the YWCA.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you guys have had a nonprofit going for years. Like, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of it was Kim just getting on and doing a ton of research and finding the things, right? Which is not easy on federal and state websites. They are not super awesome to navigate through. So
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I could only imagine. It's one of those things too where it's like, why does it have to be so hard to do good things?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I
will tell you it is hard, but it is absolutely worth it. So.
I believe it 100%. Are there any misconceptions about child advocacy centers? I know that that's probably pretty loaded, but is there any that you find yourself correcting, when you're out and about or doing interviews like this?
The couple that I've had, I guess, would be someone once, and to no fault of their own. We don't have one here.
Sure.
But they said to us, "Oh, like the Boys and Girls Club." It was like, "Oh, nope, that's not what we're doing." Boys and Girls Club, awesome. We have to have places like that. That is not what we are.
Yeah.
And the other big one that I've had is that people just want to bring their kids by for an interview because they think something's wrong. And all of our process has to be referrals from law enforcement, medical professionals, or health and welfare.
Got it.
Just to make sure we are staying, having the people doing the investigations are making these referrals to us saying, yeah, no, this does need to be done, and not just having people come in off the street saying, hey, can you talk to my kid about something?
Right. So it's not a walk-in counseling center.
Correct.
Not Boys and Girls Club, and not like a group home.
Yep. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. It is very much a forensic interview method to determine whether a one, has maltreatment occurred to a child? Two, does it rise to a level of criminal and then prosecutor intervention, in addition to advocacy services, child welfare support services, if applicable, and then referring families on to just all of those extra supports. We have a very rural population in our district, and so we want to try to not just hear an experience that a child has, but we want to try to mitigate the risk of recidivism for those families by empowering, caretakers to be able to get healthy, reduce the risk of potential crimes happening in their home or to their children. So there is a big community education and advocacy element that we want to make sure we're providing so we can reduce the risk for generations to come, but also reduce and empower families to heal from situations they've experienced now.
Wow. That's so incredible. I'm like, can I come help?
Right.
Can I volunteer?
Absolutely.
Take me with you.
Yes.
Is that, do you need help as far as like volunteers or things? I mean, what's that look like?
Yes. At some point we are going to. I would say right now we're still pretty young, as far as our business goes. What we have been doing is just having people, like, they've emailed us and say, hey, I want to help, right?
Yeah.
And again, we live in an awesome community.
Sign me up.
Everyone wants to help, right? Which is great. Like, it's so cool. And so we've kind of just been taking a list. Like,
Perfect.
Hey, shoot us an email. We'll take your information down, because we absolutely are going to have a need for volunteers and community support with something like this, especially within the first year of our life as far as the nonprofit goes. So,
Absolutely.
and it is tough to have volunteers in the kind of the day to day because of what we're talking about and what we're doing. There is a lot of training and things that need to go into how you talk to families. How you even just sit and talk with the parents while the child's being interviewed. There is a lot of components to those things.
And so, privacy too. I mean, holy cannoli, that's probably such sensitive stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a small place like ours too.
Correct. But the outreach, the community support, we're going to need all the people. So.
Okay, well, good.
Okay.
Put me on that list.
Deal.
How do you work with other agencies? Like, can you walk us through how it starts, law enforcement, prosecutors, how does that look?
So a big part of a CAC is it's called the multidisciplinary team approach. And so the condensed version of that is everybody that is involved in a child abuse investigation kind of gets together as a group and says, okay, what are we doing on this case? What are we doing on this case? And so, step one, someone comes into law enforcement or CPS and says, hey, I think this is happening with my kid. I think he's being abused. Law enforcement and CPS start their investigation. And when they decide that this child needs to tell their experience to somebody, they get a hold of the CAC and schedule the interview. That law enforcement partner or CPS then shows up at the CAC with the family so they can kind of make the introductions to our interviewer. And because rapport with anybody, any human, but especially kids, is super important.
Big time.
A kid does not just want to show up and tell a story to somebody that they don't feel comfortable with. And so sitting down with law enfortement, CPS, our interviewer, the family, and just making sure everybody's comfortable is a huge part of kind of that first step process through this. And then after the interview, we meet with law enforcement. I say we, our CAC meets with law enforcement or CPS, talks about the child's experience, their disclosure, what we call it, and kind of next steps for the family, for law enforcement, and for the investigation, kind of where it's going to go.
And they can be referred. So our advocate will, they will have information about what was the allegation, what kind of situation are we looking at, and that kind of determines where they get referred from there. Is this, a situation where maybe there's some substance abuse concerns, mental health concerns, medical neglect? Is there a form of abuse that's happening that needs to be addressed? All of those kind of have a specialty area. So even just little things like, a lot of our kids are young. We're seeing younger and younger victims of crimes. And so being able to collaborate with schools saying, look, this child has experienced, and we're not sharing the information, but this child's experienced something hard. Can you give additional support and wraparound for them? Can you, just just a counselor checking in on a youth at school to say like, hey, I don't need to know what's going on, but you're important and we want to know you're okay. And this is a safe place for you to be. Those are really critical steps that help people heal and feel heard and know that, reaching out to adults should be a safe thing. And so we want to enhance that for everybody we serve.
Gosh, and what you don't even think about what kind of, breath of fresh air that is for CPS workers, social workers, because at no fault of their own, that's why they burn out, right? It's because they can't focus on these kids because they have so many things on their plate. Mm-hmm. And so this is amazing that you guys are able to step in and kind of let me handle that part and then, be that for that child.
And make the correct referrals to people that can stay with them.
Right.
Because you're right, law enforcement and CPS, and I guarantee we want to.
Of course.
But we don't have the time sometimes to kind of follow things through to where we would like to.
Right.
And so that CAC is a good kind of middleman to say, hey, we've got this now.
Yeah.
And we're going to make sure they get to where they need to be to continue to get better from whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. My last question for you guys is kind of a personal one. It's a question we ask all of our guests here, and that is, what do you wish that you would have learned or knew about money earlier in life?
I would say, and I'm kind of spoiled, we probably both are a little bit spoiled, but retirement and kind of money planning for your future, I would say is a big one. I wish I would have learned that earlier on in my life. And I say we're spoiled because we're both state employees. So we kind of have some of that set for us, but really looking to the future and saying what 401k or what investments do I need to make? I don't feel like I was taught that as much at a younger age to where I was kind of set up for success in that world.
Or what is that?
Correct. Exactly. 401 what? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm raising a teenager, so I'm like, gosh, what am I trying to teach him about good financial management? I think learning to, one, if you work really hard, then you achieve more. So if you're willing to put the hard work in, then you can obtain the things that you want. But also with that is the fine balance and what am I trying to achieve? What is my priority? And if you learn to live within your means, your needs, not your wants, then you set yourself up for success. So I'm teaching a teenager to do budget management, and teenagers like to drive a lot. And so his gas bill is significantly more than his mom's maybe.
Yeah.
And that is just okay. But then what are you going to give up for? I can have coffee every day of the week.
Right.
You can't because you buy gas every week. And so just that it really is a good checks and balances about what are my priorities and ultimately what am I willing to work for.
Right. Oh, well, those are good. Well, you guys, thank you so much for spending time with me today and sharing with me and everybody else what you guys are doing. And it's just incredible. And I just think you guys are amazing. So
thank you for having us. Yeah.
Of course.
That's awesome.
Of course. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to donate to TRU CAC, you can do that by visiting your local P1FCU branch through our Champions for Change campaign. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.